Good afternoon. Thanks everyone for joining today. There's a couple people still showing up, but we can get started. So you've likely joined the webinar today for a reason, and we could probably guess what that is. Citrix is slow. We've all heard it. You, like all of us, have experienced pains in identifying the root causes of issues impacting user experience in your Citrix platforms, or alternatively, you're interested in keeping user experience issues at bay. Well, you're in the right spot today. In partnership with ControlUp, today we'll show you how you can gain end-to-end Citrix visibility to sustain and improve user experience with ControlUp, and best part, be able to clearly identify what is causing poor user experience. I am Matthew Metelsky, the CEO of Third Octet, and before I took this role about a year ago, I spent 18 years designing, implementing, and supporting Citrix and related technologies. I've sat, passed, and failed exams, spent days in practicums, seen products come and go, succeed and fail, and even technologies that baffle us with their functionality. Now, unfortunately, my trials and tribulations with technology are limited to documentation, diagrams, and lab environments. I'm generally not allowed at keyboards anymore. I do miss the days of building, but I don't miss the days of troubleshooting. In today's agenda, we're going to go through a brief history of nearly everything there is to know about Third Octet. Well, probably not everything, but the Coles Notes version. Secondly, we'll go through a parade of the evolution of Citrix monitoring, at least from my perspective over the past 18 years. Then I'll pass the baton to my colleagues from ControlUp, Joel and Marcel, to walk through who and what ControlUp is, and more importantly, what the products do. And of course, if you have any questions during the webinar, please ask, and we'll be sure to reserve some time at the end. So first and foremost, at Third Octet, we're a bit unique. We believe successful businesses are built on happy, engaged, and collaborative employees. Employees who are able to focus on high value and deeply meaningful work. Our technology solutions focus on removing physical place and technology as a barrier to productivity engagement, allowing employees to work when, where, and however they choose, minimizing time to productive, and allowing for a personalized definition of their own work-life balance. This is how we better the world through technology. And when we talk about work-life balance, it's not only specific to end users. We also must factor our impacts to IT professionals like yourselves. And how can we simplify your daily life to drive greater and broader joy in your responsibilities? Our solutions are not only measured in how simple they can be to consume from an end user perspective, but also how simple they are to implement and support. This approach is, reflected in how we choose our partnerships and the technologies in which we invest with everything we have. ControlUp's ability to simplify the tedious process of root cause analysis allows IT to shift their focus from reactive to proactive and stay ahead of the challenges that may impact your personal time. And if you ask me, that sounds like a good deal. So our expertise at Third Octet is really framed in 4 key pillars. First, workspace craft. Now, workforce demands for flexibility and mobility are reshaping the modern workplace. Desktop virtualization, application modernization, and workspace services really help address these concerns by enabling your company to centralize and securely deliver digital assets on demand to any device, anytime, anywhere. And secondly, integrating abilities to collaborate both in physical place, maybe not so much nowadays, but more so in virtual space is critical to modern workforce flexibility. Providing your workforce with options on how collaboration occurs, whether in email, in real time, over chat and video, and through perhaps simplified data sharing, and where that collaboration occurs, regardless of place or device, is really imperative to driving productivity, capturing creative moments, achieving more, and ultimately supporting work-life balance. And thirdly, and apologies for the back and forth on this, I'm not sure why there's a bit of a delay, we recognize cloud is not for everything. Transitioning to a hybrid cloud model is complex, and when done poorly, can negatively impact experience, really drive your costs through the roof, and tarnish the native benefits of cloud platforms such as Azure. Our expertise in platform evolution to hybrid cloud clearly identifies operational run rates, interconnectivity strategy, and the appropriate workloads to transition. And lastly, automating work by leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence to mask tedious and repetitive tasks really can transform your workforce such that they can increase time spent on the more high value work and of course meaningful work. That increases their job satisfaction, workforce morale, and general happiness. But today we're going to focus on workspace craft. Our workspace craft expertise includes industry-leading solutions from Citrix, Microsoft, iGel, Lenovo, and of course, ControlUp. We hold nearly 100 technical certifications across the team. We are a Citrix Platinum specialist. We are one of the first in Canada. As a matter of fact, we are awarded Citrix Partner of the Year for Canada in 2017. We're also a Microsoft Gold Cloud Platform Specialist. And earlier this year, we took home from iGel Disrupt the Emerging Partner of the Year for Canada. And we certainly know our way around the world of end user computing. And though I'm biased, I believe we are the leading partner in Canada. So this is the first of many webinars we'll be doing focused around workspace craft. Tomorrow, we're holding another with our guests, Ed Matheson, our Director of Professional Services, and Paulo Cantilano from Citrix, where we're going to go through the logon process and typical best practice gaps that we find there. Visit our site, registration is there. I'll be joining too as a glorified moderator. So when I first started in IT, I used to sit in front of screens, troubleshooting Citrix until the wee hours in the morning. I remember birds chirping and the sun rising as I found the root cause and quickly sent an email summarizing my findings and tested it out, packed it in for a couple hours to get up at the keyboard and make sure everyone was good in the morning for the logon. Everyone on this call has likely done that. I wish I had some of the tools around today back then, but perhaps I wouldn't be where I am today. Troubleshooting gets you into the deep bowels of infrastructure and it teaches you a lot. So when I started, Compact Insight Manager was my first tool. I was responsible for monitoring servers, beige servers that weighed a ton. I created custom monitors that would trigger against specific alerts that were relevant. Get into IT, they said. IT is fun. Well, back then it was quite painful. And, once I started going headstrong into Citrix for design and deployment, more so deployment in my early days, I'd routinely hear Citrix is slow. Logons are slow. And I'd run these huge perfmon captures pointing at all these different metrics in the hopes it would help me find the root cause of the problem. It may have been there, but it usually led me down many rabbit holes. And then, Citrix started to realize, hey, maybe we should put some native monitoring capabilities into Citrix. Let's add some high-level health monitoring to our platforms, especially for the most common failure points. IMA, XML, licensing, terminal server. Sure, defaults were good. We'd always go in and add the print service monitoring. I specifically remember creating an SOP to add that. It was nice additions, but still not much insight into user experience. Now, along came EdgeSight, the tool that would end all our demands. We were told that we'd be able to find the exact line of code in the exact program that was causing a program to stall, impacting user experience. Sure, maybe it was there. Good luck finding it. Edge site was a problem of too much info in, too much info out. So much hype, so much potential, but just too much information created complexity that was difficult to navigate. You can't use Edge site anymore, for the record. And then, of course, you get in the enterprise space. In ComTrade, if you remember them, they had management packs that would integrate with Operations Manager. We'd be able to now use SCOM to get some insight into ZenApp and health. You didn't have SCOM? Oh, great. Back to Edge site. So getting closer to today, we're certainly seeing improvements in how we monitor user experience. And Citrix Director is by far the most promising dashboard to ever grace the Citrix portfolio. It had brief summaries and a nice, easy to read interface, historical reporting, operational tools, and some integration into underlying platforms. Fantastic. Director is great. It's still heavily used today and will for quite some time. It continues to see improvements too. Yet we're still missing a lot of information when the problem is, in fact, not necessarily Citrix. And fortunately, if you are in Citrix Cloud, the recently unleashed analytics service highlighting user experience is a step in the right direction. User experience scores show a quick snap of how sessions are actually behaving from a user experience perspective. Fantastic, right? However, we still need to break out of this dashboard to find out what problems are actually impacting these scores. So there are still many gaps in the monitoring that Citrix provides us. There is a better way, right? And in 2020, if we still have to bounce back and forth between consoles, Director, PVS, Studio, to really figure out why Citrix is slow, have we really progressed much? Well, no. So the better way, as you can tell, and I've been told I need to work on my build-up skills, ControlUp is the ultimate solution that drives holistic end-to-end monitoring of your Citrix investments. And, importantly, the platforms in which these systems depend on, be it the endpoint, an iGel UD Pocket, for example, to the underlying hypervisor and hardware, such as Nutanix. ControlUp does not stop at the Citrix edge, but continues across the entire spectrum, allowing you to regain the confidence in identifying and expediting root cause analysis and remediation of issues that impact user experience. So with that, I would like to pass over to my colleagues from ControlUp, Joel and Marcel. I believe first up is Joel. Joel.
Thank you, Matthew. Let's just see here. Thank you. Just pick the right monitor. All right, I think we should be good to go. There we go. Audience view. All right, thank you so much for that great introduction of what kind of your background and your history. My name is Joel Stocker. I also have a history mainly on the Citrix side. I was almost 19 years at Citrix, decided that it was time to change it up a little bit, and about 3 months ago I joined the ControlUp team to kind of go back to kind of the front lines and to really kind of like experience and making a direct impact on what our customers are doing. And I'm also joined today by Marcel. Marcel, do you want to quickly chime in about your role?
Sure, thank you. I'm also with ControlUp. Been there for a couple of years, and like Joel, also had my share of time in the Citrix world, different roles within Citrix.
Right. Thank you. And I think he's in audio only mode, or at least he's not one of our panelists, but Rodrigo, who, by the way, doesn't look like this picture anymore. His hair is much longer, and he has a goatee right now, but he is our account executive, also covering the East Canadian market. So together with him, we typically do the demos, and I assist with POCs. But that's enough about us as individuals. Very briefly about ControlUp. So it was actually funny how you were talking, Matthew, about kind of your history and how you kind of like, early on with Compact Insight Manager and kind of like the evolution of these tools. Now, there were a bunch of guys in Europe, actually over in Israel, who had the same thing, but they decided to actually build their own product, which eventually became what we have today in ControlUp. So they kind of saw those same shortcomings in some of the tools out there, and we're looking for a better way to kind of help their own environment, because they were basically a Citrix customer, to kind of like build a solution around it, and eventually that became a product which is ControlUp today. We have thousands of customers. We also participate in all the different partner programs of the major vendors, very much an overlap what you just saw on Matthew's slide. And we do not make surfboards, although Marcel and my boss, he actually does have a surfboard business, so he created a ControlUp surfboard, but we don't sell them as part of our offering. Now, although we support all kinds of infrastructure components, especially in EUC, there are some particular challenges where ControlUp kind of was born, and where we try to kind of like focus on when it comes to our solutions. And very much like you saw in the timeline Matthew gave you, what we see is with a lot of our customers, they have very often manual processes. And some of the management is tedious. Now, sometimes that is just because they haven't taken the effort to kind of like build scripts that really work for them. But sometimes it's also just related to the user experience these different tools kind of provide. And the multiple tools, the multiple consoles, is something that you won't ever really completely get away from, because certain metrics, certain data, certain information just doesn't present as well in a similar user interface as, for example, like real-time information versus historical information. But obviously, if you run EUC, you have not only your various Citrix components with the various Citrix tools and management tools and consoles. You might also be running that, for example, on VMware ESX. So you're dealing with vCenter. Maybe you're using Nutanix. You have different kind of consoles for different purposes, and that kind of contributes to the clunkiness when you're trying to fix something, resolve something. It's very much like, hey, you read information in one place. Now I kind of need to take that and then go into another interface and kind of like, all right, this is the change I need to make. And we felt, at ControlUp, or over the years, we've been also trying to focus on kind of removing those barriers and kind of bringing it all together. So single pane of glass is a typical marketing term. It's not always reality. It's also not always the only solution, but definitely the console sprawl and reducing the amount of different kind of manual steps and switching back and forth is definitely high in the list of things we're trying to do. One thing that kind of illustrates here the picture as well is the blame storming, right? Where is the actual issue? And although we all might say, well, we're all on this together and we're trying to resolve this for kind of like to benefit the end user, sometimes there are teams that need to fix a certain problem. But if they just keep pointing at each other at, hey, where's the problem here? Then obviously it's not going to help the time to resolution. And that is something that I actually posted this picture yesterday on Twitter, and it seemed to get some traction because people recognize this kind of finger pointing. And for the user, they don't care, right? The user just wants to work. Although sometimes the user is the actual problem. Now, if you look across our solution, I'm trying to go because I know we only have an hour or 40 minutes left, and after 2 more slides, I kind of go into the console and try to do the most by demo. But if you kind of look at our full solution and our 3 main technologies, our real-time console, our ControlUp Insights, as well as ScoutBees, where Marcel will talk about more later, we try to touch on most of the kind of day-to-day common situations you as people who have to manage the environment are have to deal with. So this is not only things like troubleshooting. Issue comes in through your help desk, a user calls, they say, hey, I have an issue, help me. This is also moving that from a more reactive into a more proactive way of doing things. But that is very much about the kind of like real-time stuff. At the same time, you're getting requests from leadership, from human resources, from business leaders about how is the environment being used. Maybe from IT leadership, you get more questions about, hey, are we going to be right on capacity? When do we kind of need to expand? How are we using our resources? So historical data and trending and forecasting is becoming more and more important. Finally, something that is fairly new, although we had a logon simulator tool for quite some time, we actually took that a step further and we kind of made our first kind of like serious efforts into synthetic logins and availability testing. And like I said, Marcel will come in a little bit later and talk about that in more detail. But we try to kind of make our scope as broad as possible for the day-to-day kind of management of your environment, the operational management aspect. And of course, that goes from IT admin to help desk to leadership all across the board. But today, because we needed to kind of focus and I can literally demo for hours, that there's so much possible. But we kind of want to focus on this kind of common, kind of like, hey, Citrix is slow. Typical end user, you might open up your ServiceNow console or maybe another help desk tool, and typically you do not get a whole lot of information from your user. Right? What does that mean? Oh, Citrix is slow. I actually, I've spent so long at Citrix that this is not new. I literally once walked into a customer with a Citrix polo on, and they said, well, you have guts walking into this building. It wasn't a Citrix problem, but Citrix is the visible part for a lot of users. That hey, we use Citrix, so it must be Citrix. And obviously, it is important to understand what is the issue and to resolve the issue, and kind of like at least being able to pinpoint. Now, one thing before I switch to the console, I've noticed over the last couple of months with the current crisis we're in that, with a shift in workforce, with more and more users kind of like working from home, and especially working from home with other people, that is something, suddenly there's maybe, a spouse that is working, there's kids on Zoom school, there's, of course, more maybe internet usage by various members of the household, and it is important to understand that is going to impact obviously how people use the environment, what works. It also brings a reality to the table that there's not always everything you can control, right? I mean, you cannot typically get insight into somebody's home router or other users on their kind of like local network in the, on their local Wi-Fi. It is important to be able to kind of determine like, hey, the problem is not on our side, right? So that you at least can give the user some guidance to like, hey, maybe it has to do with other users on your network we cannot see that are kind of like, utilizing bandwidth. So that is something that is important to understand, but let's switch here to the real-time console. So for those people on the line who possibly already have used ControlUp or have been to any of our webinars, this is our main console. So this is the main user interface for kind of like the day-to-day troubleshooting, remediation, and automation. Now, automation, going to touch on that here in a minute, but it's becoming more and more important because nobody is going to, first of all, sit in front of this console and look at it for 8 hours. So it's very important that, although our kind of guidelines here are very clear, right? It's very straightforward. That was kind of like one of the edge side kind of shortcomings. A lot of information in, a lot of information out, but also no real clear indicators. You kind of had to kind of like mine the information and kind of go through it to kind of figure out. So we try to be more instructive, not only by using colors, but also by something we call the virtual expert. So we try to give you the tools in the console that kind of like take you by the hand and tell you, hey, there might be an issue here. So in the case that you maybe are going to look at this like several times a day, you can, of course, follow the colors and then look at these kind of blue hamburger icons to get more details about certain issues. In certain cases, it will just tell you, hey, you can get more information by drilling down. In other cases, it actually will provide you with recommended steps, recommended actions, certain scripts you can run, which we make available to you, certain additional, and that could be a script to actually fix a certain problem, but also to give you more information. But, this is, really, we try to kind of point you already in the right direction from the get-go without having to go through our 900 odd metrics we can actually provide you with, because that, would just be too much. So we try to build these interfaces we have in, with common sense in mind. You have these different views, depending on where you click, we've changed the view for you. It's all fully customizable, but we kind of present you with the most relevant information kind of right in your face so that you can troubleshoot. And the same goes with kind of the reaction, right? So we had this example of I think the meme Harold. So let's say that in my example, it's called Jim Slow. He kind of like says, Citrix is at this moment, when I'm in that reactive mode, when they come to me, they created a support ticket, I can, of course, kind of narrow it down. I can maybe find this machine. I can go to the session view and, type in his username. So it kind of puts you kind of on the right path and kind of focuses on where it is. Now, obviously, what does it mean Citrix is slow? And or what do they mean with Citrix slow? Of course, I can reach out to them and say, hey, explain it to me. But we also provide you with information that could be indicators that, what is being slow. So I have this custom preset here for my view. It's called UX score. It kind of brings together all these different metrics for, in this case, Jim Slow, that are relevant for the user experience, which is typical indicator of, hey, something is slow. And it gives me information about latency, gives me information about, for example, the logon duration. When users say things are slow, it could just be at the start of the day where it took a long time for them to get logged in. And from here, I can kind of like drill down and look at, hey, so what is going on here? So I can like, again, run certain scripts. I can like, analyze the logon duration. This is one of our most popular scripts. It's the analyze logon duration script, which kind of breaks down, in this case, the 104 seconds into much more detailed information about the group policy load time, the printer mapping, kind of giving you the details so that you already know what the user is experiencing. But maybe it is related to another counter. For example, you see this one here. So let me just take my own session. You see bandwidth information. You see user input delay. Currently, I'm not in that session. So you actually, let me just pull up the session here. It's this session over here. So there's nothing happening because it's like running here in the background. But if I look at this session here, and that's actually this machine over here, I can generate some action, and you see that the user input delay is kind of spiking up. And that user input delay is actually a Windows counter that gives you which is all about how long does it take for something to happen. You know, I click on a menu, how long before it builds up on the screen. With 3D models, obviously, you see kind of like that regeneration of the picture. And it's not too bad, right? I mean, yes, you see it going in yellow. If I keep on kind of like clicking on it and moving, you see it going up. But you can imagine that if this goes kind of off the charts, where this becomes really high, it gives the user the feeling of slowness. And there you see kind of like there's a 3-second delay, and now it's in the background, it goes back to 0. But again, this is, you know, something you can kind of use to pinpoint. There is always a human element. There's always this part like where you need to figure out, okay, looking at the numbers, talking to the user, you know your apps much better than me, right? I know Acrobat Reader and I know that, but you might have certain line of business applications that are really specific. So there's always this kind of human element that we can kind of take away part of it by artificial intelligence, but there is still this human element. So let me take a short breath there, and kind of like look if there's maybe any questions, because this was really about kind of being reactive and reacting to the user, saying like, hey, something is slow. I go into the console, I kind of go look at some of the numbers and then determine next steps, right? Reach out to the user, look into the application, increase the CPU priority, stuff like that.
Yeah, actually, Joel, a question came in around iGel, as a matter of fact. So I guess someone had noticed ControlUp has recently introduced iGel integration to expand out monitoring the endpoint. Can you explain a bit more of that integration?
Absolutely, great question. So thank you for that. And we are just like Third Octet. We are close partners with iGel, and we've traditionally been very focused on kind of like Windows VDAs, Windows infrastructure servers, Windows physical desktops, but it was very much focused around Windows. And we do have some support for Linux flavors like CentOS and Red Hat, but we had more and more customers say, hey, we use iGel, and it would be great if you can give similar metrics you do for like a fat client, like a physical desktop or a virtual desktop, but kind of like the traditional world. If you could get similar, not only similar metrics, like for example, the performance of the endpoint for specifically iGel, but also that I can maybe take some action. So we built that integration together with them. And let me just go here to Linux. So we have a bunch of iGel devices in our environment. So let me just go focus here and go to the machines. So as you can see, we provide, without actually having to have an agent installed on the device, we provide information about the iGel endpoint. This is some metrics about the version of the iGel OS you're running, information about metrics like CPU, memory utilization, kind of like these base metrics. But we can even go further, and we built together with iGel some specific scripts to be able to update the configuration, for example, from UMS. Reboot iGel devices, shadow the terminal devices through VNC or another VNC-enabled tool. So we build these specific integrations for iGel to kind of expand what you can do all from the single console. So now you don't only have your kind of VDA side, you don't only have your hypervisors and your ESU platforms, but now you also have kind of the iGel endpoint kind of management. Now, this is not 100%, and you still need UMS to build custom partitions, but this kind of from a day-to-day point of view gives you a lot more information, kind of like that end-to-end story we're talking about.
Great. Actually, one more question came in around NetScaler or ADC, as it now is called. Gateway monitoring. Does ControlUp also monitor other ADC functions?
So our NetScaler integration is basically talking through the NetScaler API. So what you can see typically through the interface from Citrix, we can bring in together with all the other information. So we are not just about bringing information together. When I talked about kind of the disconnected information, now I can look in context, right? I can bring certain metrics together. So if I, for example, go to the Netscaler, here I see my 2 Netscaler devices, and I can actually, get more information. So I do get to see load balancers, I have the load balancing services. I can like customize these view by adding more information. Obviously, again, in the context of EUC, seeing the HDX sessions kind of, that are coming in through my cloud gateway. That's me right there. This is my home IP apparently. And then of course I can kind of correlate that information and get like session information about that. So we bring the information together, but you can also make it actionable, right? I can, for example, hey, if something happens on the Netscaler side, then do something on my hypervisor side. Or if something happens in the session, I can run a script to get information from the Netscaler that kind of does the correlation for me. It's no longer all the clicks and going from one interface to the other interface. It's kind of in one place. Now, we do focus today at Netscaler, but yeah, even if we don't have a certain integration, so if you have a third-party product which you kind of want to bring that data together inside ControlUp, there's a lot of things. For example, what we did with IGEL, right? We built a couple of custom things through scripting, and we can do the same thing for other platforms. So if there's a certain need for others, then we can definitely kind of talk about that. But currently, Netscaler is our focus from both the ADC as well as the gateway point of view.
Okay, great.
Now, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's just there. One other question came in, but maybe I'll save it for later, just to keep on time.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about is, or actually, there's 2 items I want to talk about, but is how are we going to kind of move this from reactive, where Jim Slow or Harold or whatever your user is calls you and say, hey, things are slow, to kind of looking at this in a different way and using our automated actions to become more proactive. And one of the things I typically say, our triggers and our script actions are a little bit like if this, then that. I'm a big home automation guy, when you walk into my house, there's touch screens and Google and Philips Hue and everything is automated. And it's really about, what is the condition? For example, in my home, it's like I'm coming home at night, it's dark. I open my front door, there's a sensor there, my lights automatically go on. In our automated actions, it's very similar, but it is focused around your IT infrastructure. And these triggers tied together with an action, an automate or with a script action, kind of bring a lot of value, because now I don't have to look at my ControlUp monitor for 8 hours or look at my ControlUp console for 8 hours. Now I kind of get notified or automatically take action and become much more proactive. And a simple example of that is we have this condition, this trigger, that basically says, hey, if the logon duration for any user across our environment is longer than 25 seconds, then, and this is kind of where I combined a couple of scripts together, then first analyze the logon duration for that user. And so get the information, the detailed information about that user. Once it has that information, and this all happens in the background, automated, right? Automatically when it's over 25 seconds, then it takes that information, actually creates a ServiceNow ticket automatically through the ServiceNow API, and then eventually it sends me a Slack notification. And a good example of that is right here. Oh, let me go to Slack. This was earlier on, 1:02, so this was not too long ago. So it sent me this Slack notification earlier. This was actually when I logged in. It took 42 seconds, so this all went automated. It created a ServiceNow ticket. So let me just click on that link I have there in Slack. Now there is the ticket information with all the information I need to start troubleshooting. And this is basically it. There was not a user that was involved in this. This was all automated through an automated action where you basically now can go ahead of the curve and reach out to the user, or maybe fix the problem and then reach out to the user. Again, elevate the level of service you provide to your users, but also you can use these automated actions to reduce the overall kind of the overall like reactiveness and spending time. You want to find these areas in your environment and set and forget. We have all more important things to do than fixing an end user's problem. So let's just automate these things, prevent these things from happening, and basically, the less time you spend in the console, the better. That's my opinion. Now, before I'm going to hand it over to Marcel, I want to briefly touch on insights. So insights, it's all about our historical data. Now, historical data has two benefits. First of all, if this user didn't kind of like open a support ticket with you like immediately, but like 2 days later, or they say like, hey, the other day, like 4 days ago, I had some issues, then of course you need to be able to go back in time. And the insights data doesn't only provide you with high-level dashboards that kind of give you a lay of the land of your environment to see across all these different categories like users and computers, kind of like what are kind of culprits, what are kind of issues, what are contributors to certain metrics. It also gives you details on, or can guide you to, for example, where there were certain issues. A good example of that is the protocol trends, right? You might want to have a look at your environment and see over a longer period of time. So let me see, it's just building up here. So now I'm looking at protocol latency, and it's typically like, well, you probably want to look at these kind of peaks, right? What is going on there? Anywhere in Insights, you typically can click on a graph, and it will provide you more information. So for example, I'm looking at a month's worth of protocol latency. I see this user CC9753. Doesn't sound like a real human being, but that's obviously causing a lot of this. So now I can kind of click through, and now it takes me to that user. Gives me a lot of detail about the user session. It gives me a timeline of what the user was doing. It gives me, it's like loading there. So here's the timeline of what the user was doing during the session. It kind of gives me, again, more detailed, specific to this session's information about session counters like RAM, CPU, protocol latency. And again, I can click again and get more information, which specific processes were contributing to that. So again, this gives me more tools to find issues in my environment. It gives me this end-to-end visibility, which I can use. Now, with that said, again, this is kind of a mix of proactive and reactive. But how I'm going to handle something that I didn't anticipate. I can set up all these kind of monitors, but in an EUC environment, a typical kind of like situation is of course, people come in at 8 in the morning, or they don't come in these days, but they at least start working at, hopefully, at 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning. I don't want to be the person getting like 20 different support tickets on my plate, right? I want to be able to kind of like know ahead of time if there's going to be problems, so that before kind of my users start working in the morning, that I have those resolved. And that's all about kind of like synthetic logins, or using synthetic logins to kind of like get ahead of the curve and understand, if there are going to be issues, to address those. So let me see if there's any questions in the meantime before I hand it over to Marcel.
Nope, we are good. Quiet audience.
Okay, Marcel. So I understand that you prepared something for us that can kind of give us these kind of insights in, what if, right? Am I okay for my first kind of group of users? So if you can take it from here and tell a little bit more about ScoutBees.
Thank you. Thank you, Joel. So yes, just to tie it up with where Joel was here's ControlUp insights on our environment. We could see, information regarding the user logins, including slowest logons, and I can drill into that, but I would be reactive. If I was just coming over here and pinpointing that Frank had a bad time logging in, I'm just coming after the fact. And what you want to do is you want to have something that you will come and be able to do this in front of you ahead of time. And that's where ScoutBees comes into play. So ScoutBees is a new offering from ControlUp. It can be run independently, where you can set your ScoutBees to run tests and do logins into your environment, and it will do it proactively throughout 24 hours a day. You could set whether you want to do the logins every 30 minutes, every 60 minutes, or every 15 minutes, and you'll get a report whenever a login failed, or what it reports on the time it took to log in, even with a breakdown of what those login times were. Now, let's take a look at some of those reports. So if I test this, if I look at the reports for this logins, I can see I had success most of the time. I had a couple of failures. I can drill into the failure and understand where did that test fail. In this case, it was able to authenticate and enumerate, but it couldn't download an ICA file. When it does launch, it will go through the whole process of launching, get you how long did it take to be ready for the user to work. There is some some deployment scenarios where we can even know some enrichment data, which server was I connected with DDC broker or which delivery controller brokered that session. And one thing that we're already doing is we bring a screenshot of what happened at the end of that login. And this is in this case, it was supposed to log in all the way through. What we're going to be doing in the future, just to put in a stake in the future, is also analyze what happened within this screen. So a white screen like this wouldn't be a successful login. Yes, I did get to my Citrix session. I did launch the application, but it didn't complete the login into that service within my environment that I wanted to. And that's something that will be available soon. Let's take a look at how we defined this test. If I go one step back, you could see I can have multiple tests. I'll create a Scout. That's how we defined our testings. And I could leverage the launchers, the hives, to launch the test from the cloud. And we have one in the US and one in Europe. You could do that through your NetScaler gateway or through Citrix Cloud Gateway. And you'll provide the address for that. Okay, and let's go ahead and configure that. And just to show how easy it is, I'll configure my NetScaler. I'll configure a service account with a password. There is options for one-time password if you need to, and I can get the resources that that user is entitled to launch. I can select what do I want to test out of the resources published in Citrix for that user, define how often do I want to run it, that test, and then give it a name. So with this, I will create a test, just like the ones that we see here already created. Just to, one more thing is, of course, we're running tests. If a test fails, I want to have a notification about it, and I have an example here of an alert policy. If the test status equals to fail, I want to know about it. If the test status equal to succeed, right, the login was successful, but the logon duration was greater than 45 seconds, I would still consider that a failure. And either one of these conditions with an or, if it happens to subsequent tests, for example, or whatever number you want to set, I want to get notified, and you could define that over here. So that is on a brief ScoutBees, where you can define your test, get your overall test results. There are several offerings that include a personal offering that is free. More than welcome to try it at scoutbees.io. Sign up, and you'll be able to get the personal version. You will have a 14-day trial of an unlimited enterprise ScoutBees. So again, a quick overview of this logon simulator. Just to any questions? Matthew, anything from the public?
Yeah, one came in. Is ScoutBees able to simulate logons internally?
That's a great question. So let me answer it in two parts. So if I'm doing that from our cloud, using an access gateway, a NetScaler gateway, you do have that option of having OTP, and there's some options for static or even creating the OTP, and that would be done externally. You do have the option of defining your own launchers or hives, and you could have as many as the plan that you subscribe to allow you, and those will allow you to launch directly from storefront. Or you could even go through a NetScaler if you want. It gives you the flexibility of being able to test internally without having OTP limitations. That is something that most of us do have. Or if you go via the cloud, you do have the ability to select OTP. There's a couple of options that we offer, and there's more. You can read about it here.
So Marcel, just to clarify, so you can run these kind of internal logons, but you would still need kind of this SaaS platform to configure it and get kind of the details. Is that a correct statement?
So let's talk about what you need. That's great. So if you want to run from the cloud, external launches, you would need to either not require OTP or have one of the supported one-time passwords options, and then you will leverage our launchers or our hives directly from the cloud. So no infrastructure to set up if you want to run from the cloud. If you want to run internally, you'd basically deploy something called a hive, which is a service. You download it directly from here, from the Hive screen. You install that, and it will run as a service in one of your PCs. And then within that PC, you don't have to be logged in or have any interactive session. It just, as a service, can launch multiple sessions scheduled through the engine over here. So both options available from the cloud completely as a service, or using your own internal launchers, which will require you to provide, of course, a machine where that service can run.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yep. And just on that, again, there are several offerings that we have. Please go ahead, create it. You can get started for free, and the personal, which is the basic with the one test per hour, just from the cloud, will be available forever. You'll get a full-blown 14-day trial of the enterprise, which allows you to configure your internal launchers, which is what we call the custom hives, and up to 50 tests and different test intervals that you can set.
Well, thanks, gentlemen. It's coming up close to the hour, and I got to say, I did test out ScoutBees myself, and I got a request, an email from the service desk asking why I was logging in every 30 minutes if everything was okay. So next time I'll do that and make sure not to use my own account. I've lost a lot of privileges now that I'm CEO. So there was one other question that came in. Does ControlUp monitor provide any Citrix Cloud native monitoring? And I think I'll throw that at Joel there.
So first of all, let me make a generic statement. So like I said, we have about these 900 different metrics we provide you with, and a part of that are coming through native kind of data connections with vCenter, with Citrix apps and desktops, through our NetScalers, and then there's a whole lot of metrics that come through our agent. Now, this agent doesn't care where it runs. It can be a physical machine, it can be a virtual machine on premises, it could be a virtual machine in the cloud, and that could be a VDA, right? That could be even Microsoft WVD. So our agent is kind of agnostic to kind of where it runs. Now, as far as metrics that come from the Citrix Cloud virtual apps and desktop layer, so information about delivery groups and kind of like the technical administrative information, that is today only coming through the on-prem version of Citrix apps and desktops. but very soon, and well, I mean, it will look very similar as what you would see today with apps and desktops with on-prem. But we will support in probably probably next month, 2 months maybe. We are planning to, officially support the Citrix Cloud kind of like admin layer when it comes to getting those metrics. But we already have customers today that are using Citrix Cloud. They have either their VDAs in the cloud, some of them have VDAs on-prem, and they are can use ControlUp to almost with all the same features as they can do with an on-premises environment.
Great, thank you. That was the last question. And, I want to thank you both for the great insight, great overview of ControlUp and ScoutBees. And I want to throw an offer out there. I don't have t-shirts or Yeti cups or coolers to give away today, but I always think what's better than swag, right? A complimentary proof of concept. So sometimes we get all these great t-shirts and they're fun, they fade, they shrink every time they're washed like me. With ControlUp, you'll provide the best user experience possible that your boss will have no choice but to give you a raise. So with that raise, you can buy as many t-shirts as you want. So I'll offer a complimentary proof of concept. If you're interested in taking us up on that offer, drop me an email. My email is there. Glad to get back in touch with you, have a call, and link you up with our engineers. And with that, I would like to thank everyone for joining today. Be sure to check out the future events. We'll be listing them on our website at thirdoctet.com. And of course, we'll broadcast them across social media. So be sure to visit us on Twitter at Third Octet or on LinkedIn. And I'd like to wish everyone a great day, a great evening. Stay well, and we'll see you soon.